Hi lovelies, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Maria, and in today's video I'm just going to be going through 10 of the books I want to read before the end of this year. Now, at the start of this year I did do a 25 for 2025 and I think I've made pretty good progress in that list. I've ended up reading 13 of the books that I put on it, so more or less halfway through the books that I wanted to read. Now, to make the list that I wanted to read for the end of the year, I did actually go through them in my journal, so this is where I kind of logged them to see if there was anything on there, or to see if kind of the 10 books on there should be the 10 that I read before the end. And I have picked some of them. Some of them I have picked from this list, but some of them I'm not really that interested in. So in terms of the books that I have read off my 25 for 2025, I'll put them on the screen. I'll let you see these are the ones that I have read. And then in terms of the ones that were left over, these are the ones that I haven't read. So some of these I will still read. Some of them I will continue to try and read them before the end of the year. So you will see those in the list. But for some of them, I just looked at them and thought, you know, I've either lost interest or they're kind of more summary books and I just didn't get to them before then. Or for one of them, they're actually being traditionally published and I can't read them until 2026. So Peaches and Honey by R. Rada. I'm not able to read that until next year. I did read one of her other books, so I could maybe kind of use that as a sub for that book because I just can't get a hold of it now until it's traditionally published. So I'm kind of going to tick that one off as if I did read it. So yeah, I'm probably not technically going to meet my 25 for 2025, but as I say, it's really interesting how your reading taste can kind of change through the year, or what your priority books can be at the end of the year versus the start of the year, because there's quite a few on there that I know were probably getting hyped up at the start of the year, whereas now I'm just not as interested in them and don't really have anything putting me to read them. So I probably will just leave those unread for now and maybe they'll carry over to my 26 for 2026, but we'll see. But I do have a stack of books that I've pulled out that I do want to read. I've only got 7 physically and a few more are on my Kindle, so I'll talk about those at the end. But I have a stack of 10 books that I want to try and read before the end of this year. Now, I'm not going to be too hard on myself if I don't get to these, but they're just 10 books that are definitely in the forefront of my mind of me wanting to read. So I think it'll probably be a natural fit to try and get to these before the end of this year. But yeah, I'm not going to be too rigid on myself. I'm not going to be too hard on myself if I don't get to them, but I'll probably put these out just to keep them at the front of my mind and hopefully I'll be able to read them all before the end of this year. So yeah, basically just be going through that list, going through the stack of books I have and the ones I want to read before the end of the year. So without further ado, let's just get into the video. So with this stack, you'll probably see a bit of a theme of me wanting to either complete or continue series that I'm in the middle of. And one of the first books that I kind of noticed that I do want to kind of read around this time of year, just because of the vibes, is Enchantress by Kaylee Smith. Now, I read Phantasma and I'll be honest, I wasn't really expecting to love it as much as I did, but I really did end up getting engrossed in the story and I really liked the characters, I really liked the vibes it gave. A lot of people had pitched it as kind of Caraval, but with a more gothic and dark twist, and I definitely think that's what we got, and I'm a huge fan of Caraval, so it obviously worked for me. So in the first book of this series, we've got two sisters who essentially end up getting embroiled in this game within this house called Phantasma. I can't remember the character's name in the first book, but basically the older sister ends up having to go into that game within Phantasma to try and save her sister, because her sister ventured on that journey because they're trying to basically make some money to keep their estate, because their mother died at the start of the story and essentially their house and estate was going to be taken from them. So she goes into Phantasma to try and win the prize that you get at the end of it, but her older sister goes in to try and save her because it's obviously not a great place to be. So obviously with the other sister there is a bit of a love story within there in that first book, and we're basically just following on from the events that happened in the first book with this one. So we're following the other sister within this one, and I've heard a lot of people say that they actually loved this one a lot more than they loved Phantasma, so be really intrigued to see where I land with that. And some of the books I've got on my list kind of for later in the year are quite heavy, and I think this would be a nice kind of still spooky season, still kind of autumnal read to put in between some of those more heavy reads. So I'm going to put this on my list because, as I say, I really love Phantasma. It'll also be kind of completing a series as it's up to. I think there is going to be more books in this series, but I'll be completing what's out in this series, and yeah, just think it'd be a good palette cleanser between some of the heavier reads that I have planned for the rest of the year. Next up is kind of a newer acquisition for me, but it's one that's just staring at me and I want to read it ASAP, and that's The Exorcism. My light just went off. Let me just get that charging. So as I was saying before, I was rudely interrupted by my light. The next book I have on my list is The Exorcism of Fairies by J.L. Vampa, and this is a new release. I think this came out just this year, but it's basically been pitched as a dark academia romance, and that's mixing two of my favourite things. I absolutely love dark academia, really enjoy romance within my stories, so this could be a real winner for me. And quite honestly, as soon as I seen the cover, a lot of it was a cover buy. I really just wanted to pick this one up, but I believe this one is set in the 1990s in Ireland, I believe we have two kind of students, or I'm not really sure what they are, but essentially they're within this academy and they're working together to try and find a cure for this plague that has overcome the country, and that's all I really know about it. I just know that we've got two of these scholars that are kind of reluctantly working together, guessing the romance is going to be between them. We have some really nice art at the start of this as well, and yeah, basically I was sold on this one with the vibes, just dark academia, romance, 1990s Ireland. What more could you want? It just sounds like it's going to be a really good atmospheric read, so hoping that it delivers on that and it is a really good read. But I'll probably be picking this one up pretty soon because we're mid-October now and I just think this would be a perfect October read, so I may be reading this one sooner rather than later because it is really just staring at me from my shelves. Next up, I've got The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte, and the main reason I want to pick this up is firstly I do like the premise of it, but secondly two of my absolute favourite classics are by Charlotte Bronte and Emily Bronte, and I feel a little bit bad for leaving Anne Bronte out, and I do think she's kind of the forgotten sister when it comes to her literary works because most people do hail Emily and Charlotte, and I've heard a lot of people who do love those saying that this is actually better. So this one, again, I don't really know too much of the premise of this one. I know it's kind of in the same gothic strain as Emily and Charlotte's works, but it just says, when a mysterious and beautiful young widow becomes the new tenant of Wildfell Hall, rumours immediately begin to swirl around her. Almost against his will, Gilbert Markham is drawn to the elusive and singular Helen Graham, but even as he falls in love, he finds himself divided from Helen by dark secrets and painful memories from her past life. So sounds like it's definitely going to be gothic, definitely maybe giving a mix of kind of JNR and Wuthering Heights, so I think they've obviously all been heavily influenced by certain aspects of their own lives, and I'm hoping it'll come through in this writing because I absolutely love, as I say, JNR and Wuthering Heights, the vibes, the gothic vibes, just the storylines, and I will say that they are much more accessible classics than some of the others I've read like Jane Austen and things like that. If you're intimidated by classics, they're very, very readable. You know, they're not too unapproachable or anything like that, so hoping I'll get the same with this one. But yeah, I just kind of felt bad for Anne. I haven't picked her up off my shelf, and it sounds like it's going to be, again, a perfect kind of October-November read just with that premise. So I was supposed to read it last year, didn't get to reading it, and it is on my 25 for 2025, so sticking to that, and hopefully I'll get this ticked off for this year. Next up is another one where I'll be trying to continue a series, and that's Frederick Bachman's Us Against You, and this is the second book in the Beartown series. So I read Beartown earlier in this year. It was actually one of my 25 for 2025 as well. Read it I think probably in around January or something like that, and fell in love with Frederick Bachman's writing, and I've actually read quite a few of his books because of that book this year, and I would still say that Beartown is probably my favourite book that I've read by him, and I'm really intrigued to read on in this series and see what happens with those characters. So the premise of Beartown, if you haven't heard about it, is we're basically in this very snowy and small town in Sweden, and basically what they have going for them is hockey. They have this hockey team who are about to do quite well and will probably put them on the map for tourism and things like that, so it'll hopefully bring a bit of tourists to the town to boost the economy. So they're all really pitting their hopes on this game so that the team can win and, as I say, basically boost the economy because of the tourism that it will bring. Then there's an incident that happens within the town that kind of divides opinion, and we're really just following all the characters as they kind of experience the aftermath of that, and you're really seeing people's morality come out and kind of where their loyalties lie. And it sounds like it's a bit of a nothing book when you explain it like that, but it's honestly a book that evoked so many emotions from me, and I'm not usually an emotional reader. You know, I do get emotional about things in terms of I can understand if something's sad, if it's happy, but usually I don't get kind of rage or anger or anything like that too badly. So I know it's a really good book when I start to feel those feelings and I'm really feeling them and not just understanding that this is what the author's trying to do. So Beartown was definitely a book like that for me, and I'm really intrigued to read on, see where the characters end up and kind of where they go. I've heard as the story goes on it gets even more heartbreaking, and if you've read Beartown you know that that's going to be a difficult feat, so very intrigued to read on in this. Because of the backdrop and because of the setting, I think this is a perfect winter read, so hoping to pick this up maybe in November or December. This next book again is one of my 25 for 2025, and I'm actually putting myself on a rule for this one that if I don't read it by the end of the year, I'm getting rid of it because I'm just sick of looking at it on my shelves, and I'm kind of thinking it's just not something that I'm interested in, but I feel like I should at least try this first book before getting rid of the series. And you've probably seen me mention it before, but it's Shatter Me by Tahira Mafi, and this one I have the first 5 books in the series. My sister bought them really cheaply from the works and read the first one, didn't enjoy it. She's not really a fantasy or a dystopian reader anyway, so it didn't really mar my judgment of it, but she didn't enjoy it, so she gave me the books to try because she thought it might be something that I would enjoy. And and on paper it probably would be. I do like to hear Moffy's writing in terms of her This Woven Kingdom series, but I do know that the writing style varies widely from this series because this is YA, this is more dystopian, and I've just heard some really mixed things about this. Some people have this as a god tier series, other people really hated it when they read it. All I really know about it is it's a dystopian novel about this girl who has a deadly touch. She's being kept in this kind of dictatorship and they want to use her as a weapon, and that's all I really know. I know there's a good love triangle in here, I believe, and for some reason I just haven't picked it up. I think it's been about 3 years now that I just haven't picked this one up, and I don't know why. I don't know what's putting me off. I think it is something that I probably would enjoy, but for some reason I'm just never picking it up. I've had it on multiple monthly TBRs and I just haven't picked it up. So if I don't read it by the end of this year, I'm just taking it as it's not something that I'm interested in, and I will donate those editions to the library or something, because 5 books is a lot of space on my shelves, and if I'm not going to read this anytime soon, someone else might as well avail of it. So while I'm not being strict overall in this TBR, I think I'm going to be a little bit strict with myself on this one because it's been on my TBR for too long, and if I don't read it this year, I'm probably just not that interested in it. So next up is one of my most highly anticipated releases of this year, and I actually just got this copy delivered a couple of days ago, and that's Alchemy of Secrets by Stephanie Garber. So I did mention Caraval earlier. I really love that series, and that was written by Stephanie Garber. So when I heard she was coming out with an adult debut, I was really excited and ended up pre-ordering the Waterstones edition of this one. Now this one, all I know about it is I believe we're following a student who goes to see this fortune teller or something like that, and is basically told she has 48 hours to live. So she needs to go and find this certain artifact that's going to give her her life back or something like that. I think it's set in around the 1920s or something like that in old Hollywood, very art deco kind of vibes. And I think there's somewhere in here a deal with the devil. I'm basically going with the cover that I got, which says the devil, good for one deed. So I'm guessing there's some sort of deal with the devil encompassed in this as well. Now from the initial kind of reviews I've seen of this one, I've seen a lot of people say that the only thing that's really adult about this is that the characters are older, and going into the story knowing that I think will help in terms of my reaction to it, because I was intrigued to see how Stephanie Garber's writing style would translate to an adult novel, because a lot of her charm, for me anyway, is her whimsical and almost childlike wonder when it comes to her stories. So I was really intrigued to see how that would translate into an adult novel. So I think from what I've heard, it's probably going to be similar writing style, similar vibes, but we have adult characters and maybe a few more adult themes, but we'll see. I haven't read it so I can't comment on that, but it's one of my most highly anticipated releases, so I really do want to try and read this ASAP, and it's a pretty short book, so I don't think it'll be too difficult to get this on the TBR this year. And then last up for the physical books is Middle Game by Shannon Maguire. This was on my 25 for 2025, and it's also a book I've just had on my radar for quite some time, and an author that I've had on my radar for quite some time. They go by a few different pen names. I think it's Shannon Maguire and Mira Grant, and I think they maybe write different stories depending on their pen name. I think Mira Grant might be more horror and dystopian. Not 100% sure on that, but I believe under the Shannon Maguire pen name, it's more kind of fantasy and whimsical from what I've seen. Take all of that with a pinch of salt. That's just from me kind of surmising that. And in fact, now I've said that, I think this one's actually a bit more dystopian. I'm not too sure, but essentially this one just says that it's a story around an America run in the shadows by the Alchemical Congress, a powerful society focused on transmuting reality itself. And I think we're following two different characters who are working under this certain professor. They might not exactly be human. There's maybe a bit of a mystery around what they are, and I'm not sure if they're going to be trying to kind of pertain this godhood within here. They are working with their professors to do that. The synopsis is quite vague on this one, and I'm wondering if it's going to be a bit similar to like Gideon the Ninth or something like that, where you're kind of embroiled in this mystery the entire way through. Maybe you'll be a bit confused the entire way through as to where it's going to go. I'm not too sure. As I say, I haven't read from Shannon Maguire before, so the writing style will likely be very different from that series. That series does have a very unique voice, but I'm just wondering if the structure of the story might be similar. But I've just heard some really great things about this one and this author in general, so as it's one of my 25 for 2025, I definitely want to try and get this ticked off the list before the end of this year. So that's it for the physical reads. In terms of my Kindle reads that I have, I do want to get to Good Spirits by B.K. Borison. I actually have the e-arc of this, so I'm going to be starting reading this in the next few weeks. But essentially this is a romance between a woman and the ghost of Christmas past. I think a lot of it is inspired by the Christmas Carol, and that's one of my absolute favourite stories, particularly the Muppets Christmas Carol. And I really loved First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, and also Love Life Farms. I really enjoyed the first book in that series. I haven't quite continued with that series because the second book was a bit of a letdown, but in terms of the first book and kind of that Christmas charm, I really loved it. So I'm hoping that's going to be translated into this one. I don't know too much about the story in terms of what's actually going to happen. All I know is it's a romance between this girl and the Ghost of Christmas Past. I believe he's Irish as well, so intrigued to see how that all ties together. But even though it's only October, I am going to try and read this obviously before it comes out next week, and I have the e-arc, so hoping to get to that pretty imminently. I then have The Primal of Blood and Bone by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this is the last book in the kind of From Blood and Ash and Fire and Flesh and all of that series that's kind of interconnected. I've read all of the books so far, really loved them. Last few books I will say I've been a little disappointed in, but for the most part I've really enjoyed this series, really love the characters, and this is the last book that kind of ties everything together. And in case you haven't heard of this series, we start off on book 1 with From Blood and Ash with Poppy, who is basically the maiden of this world. She's been kept away from everyone her entire life and essentially will be what they call ascended when she turns a certain age, so that she can kind of save the kingdom and save their way of life going forward. A lot of the story kind of surrounds her being pure and not having relationships. That is until she meets her new guard Hawk, who maybe changes her mind a little bit about what the world actually is and maybe changes the direction of her life going forward. And the story goes from there. It really does go from there. There's quite a few books in between there and this book, but that's kind of the premise of the first book. There is a prequel series that follows slightly different characters that are interconnected within this story, and there is a whole reading order that you're supposed to follow to make sure you get the most out of the story with those. And I've very much done that. I followed the reading order and I've really loved, as I say, both the series, and I'm really invested in these characters, so really intrigued to see how the series ends. So want to try and read that ASAP so that I can finally mark that series as complete. And then lastly, I do want to read Wrath of the Fallen by Amber Fee Nicole, and again this is finishing a series. That book did just come out or will be coming out shortly. I think it's actually the start of November that book comes out, but I want to try and read that as soon as it comes out so that I'm up to date on it. It is quite an intricate series, so I want to read it while the series is still kind of fresh within my mind. But Amber Fee Nicole does this really cool thing where she almost does like a previously on and gives you a rundown of where we've got to from the previous books and the important points that you need to remember from the previous books so that the rest of the story is going to make sense. And I know that's probably not easy to do, but I wish all fantasy authors would do that. It would be so handy. But she does it for all of her stories, so I'm pretty sure there'll be that element within this fourth book. At least I hope, because I'm not 100% fresh on all of the details, but if it's the same as her other books, I'm sure she'll have that little blurb going through all of the important details from the last 3 books. But again, if you haven't heard of this one, this is an urban fantasy and we're following Diana, who is basically this monster within this world who made a deal with a demon hundreds of years ago to save her sister, and she's basically his slave. She'll do whatever he needs done, and he basically sends her on this journey to find this old artifact or this old book called the Book of Azrael. At the same time, we've got Sam Kyle, who is basically the world ender. He's this ancient kind of godlike king who is also looking for this Book of Azrael, because whoever has this will have, you know, certain powers and things like that, and it ends up putting Diana and Sam Kyle in the same line of sight, and essentially their story goes from there. They're very reluctant allies in trying to find this Book of Azrael in the first book, and let's just say if you want a true enemies to lovers and a true FMC who isn't afraid to have some rage and definitely doesn't embody that damsel in distress trope, you'll really like this one. If you like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Vampire Diaries, again I think it's been heavily influenced by that just in terms of the vibes and the tone, so if you like those I think you'll really like this one as well. But as I say, it's the 4th book in the series and I'm pretty much up to date in that one, so it'd be great to kind of tick that one off before the year ends. So that's it. That's the 10 books I want to get to before the end of this year. Obviously these ones as well as the Kindle ones that I've just said. Really hopeful that I will be able to get to all of these, and I am really excited to read all of them, so I'm hoping it won't be too much of a chore to try and pick these up before the end of the year. But let me know what you've got in your end of year TBR, or are you just going to keep on mood reading as you have been, or are there any books that you want to prioritise to get to before the end of this year? Put those all in the comments below. But if you don't have anything to comment, just put a little book emoji to let me know you got to the end. If you like this video, do remember to give it a like, and if you want to see more from me, remember to subscribe. I post 2 videos per week and it's videos like this, so TBRs, book shopping, reading vlogs, all good bookish things like that. Other than that, thanks so much for watching this one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one soon. Bye!